Hey there, Bobby Klink from Your Online Genius. Today we're going to continue our series about podcasts and the legal issues that can come up about podcasts. Just as a reminder, I'm an intellectual property lawyer and an online entrepreneur, and I help other online entrepreneurs protect their businesses and protect their online platforms. My business, Your Online Genius, is intended to help online entrepreneurs do it themselves so they don't have to shell out tens of thousands of dollars on a lawyer like me or some other lawyer to do the work for them. We provide you free resources like these training videos and everything else to really make sure that you have the tools that you need to do it yourself. That's the idea behind the business, and that's what we do. So again, I'd encourage you, if you haven't liked the page yet, like it. Make sure that you're getting all the content, and make sure that you don't miss these important lessons. Earlier this week, we've covered a couple of issues about podcasting, including choosing the right music or how to not get sued about music, and then also what to do in naming your podcast and how to avoid getting sued because of the name you choose. Today, we're going to deal with something a little bit different. It's not really about getting sued because of your podcast. It's about how you can make sure you have the legal steps in place to maximize the value you can get out of your podcast. Because again, your podcast is a business tool. So your legal protection really, you don't want to be wagging the dog here. You want to make sure that your legal protection is in place to help you maximize the value of your podcast. And what we're going to talk about today is what you need to get guests to sign when they come on, or agree to when they come onto your podcast, to give you the maximum protection. Now, there's no question that for a lot of podcasts, the guest interview is the most valuable thing. I mean, if I have a podcast, or I shouldn't say when I launch my podcast in the future, I suspect that the most value people are going to get will come from those interviews, because I'm going to have on experts. My questions with them will obviously have some value, but it's the insights, it's the nuggets that they give you in an interview show that are the value. So there's no question having guests on is great value. It's also good for business reasons because, look, you build a relationship with those people. From my appearances as a guest on various podcasts, I've made a bunch of relationships with people who I now would consider to be, the people who are going to be on my launch teams, going to be my affiliates, going to be all of those things, because we have a relationship. We know, like, and trust each other. So again, it's hugely valuable. There is no question that if someone comes on and does an interview on your show, you can play the interview. That's really not an issue. But I want to talk for a moment about what the two legal issues are that we're going to talk about here, what the areas of law are, okay? First, what you have is that you need to understand that there's a question of who owns the copyright in an interview. It's really strange that you would have that question, but it's actually an incredibly murky area of the law. I'm not going to get you into the details of it. What I'll tell you is that some courts have seemed to indicate that the person doing the interview owns it. Some courts have suggested that the person being interviewed owns it, and some people suggest that it's a joint copyright and you both own it. Well, what does that mean? That means it's not clear if you own it, your guest owns it, or you both own it. And again, remember, copyright is what gives you the exclusive right to make a copy and use any copy of that interview. So, if you were to find yourself in a world where a court concluded that your guest owned the copyright, you would not have the right to make a copy of it. So that's why that comes into play. The second area of law that we have to consider, and you need to think about in this process, is the right to publicity, or personality rights. Again, that's an area of law that says that every person has the right to control their name, likeness, and image. And it varies from state to state. Some states give more protection than others, but that's kind of a base level. Everybody has the right to protect their name, their image, and likeness. Now, obviously, if you play an interview, you're going to use their name. You're probably going to use their image in any kind of marketing. So, it's very much, tied up with this issue when you have a guest on your show. Now, before I went into those areas of law, I said there's really no question you have a right to play the interview on your show. And that's because regardless of who owns the copyright, and regardless of the fact that your guests have a right to control their name, image, and likeness, the fact is that by coming on and talking with you and by being interviewed, they have implicitly agreed to to appear and to have that be aired. Again, that's the whole purpose, right? I mean, they didn't go on there just to talk. They went on there to have an interview, which would then be played and be shown. They also probably gave you their image, right? They gave you a headshot. I have to give headshots every time I appear on a show because the podcast hosts want to be able to promote it. So I am, by doing that, implicitly giving them protection. Now, there are few things in the law that are 100% certain, but this is one where I'm 99.99% sure that no court would ever say you couldn't play an interview you did on your podcast when the whole purpose of them appearing was to be on your podcast. So that isn't the issue. If that's not the issue, what is the issue? Again, remember when we started the video, what I said is this is about getting the maximum potential benefit out of your podcast. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're a savvy podcaster, you have your podcast, right? And you're playing it at, in iTunes and Stitcher, in all of those sources, maybe iHeartRadio. So you have it appearing all over there. But you may also, either now or in the future, want to use parts of podcasts for different purposes. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, let's say you ask a question about what is your favorite business book of every guest who comes on your show, right? At some point in the future, you might want to create a lead magnet that's a PDF that is, basically, hey, what are the books that the 50 top entrepreneurs suggest that every entrepreneur should read? And you're not, you could probably just put a list without a problem. But what if you wanted to say, hey, Bobby Klink suggests, boom. Okay, all of a sudden you're using my name. And if you put my picture, you're using my image. Well, did I give you permission to do that by appearing on your podcast? I don't think so. I don't think that's implicit. Or what if you want to just, forget its books, but do something similar with just the best advice and give that as away as a freebie? Or what if you want to package up these recordings in a different way and put them as a freebie in an online course you have? Or what if you want to package a bunch of them together and say, hey, I've taken, all the advice from all of my shows and about list building and put it into one big audio file that you can listen to, and here I'm going to give it to you. Give me your email address. The problem is that your guests have not implicitly agreed, or at least haven't clearly implicitly agreed, to allow you to do that. So what that means is that if you don't have a document that says you can do that, theoretically your guests in the future could object if you do it. And so that's where you don't want to find yourself. You don't want to find yourself in the shoes of, on a legal ground, not being able to do it. But also, let's be honest, some of your more popular guests or your more famous guests might say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't agree to this, and it could sour your relationship. So what you want to do instead, and to avoid this problem and to give yourself maximum flexibility going forward, is have your guests agree in advance to give you full rights to use the material in any way you see fit. So again, ideally, you're going to say, hey, to the extent they have any copyright, rights in it, they give that to you. They transfer it to you, but they have a license, say, to use it themselves to promote. And that they give you or your company, the right to use use everything that you do during this interview to the maximum extent. Now, let's be clear. You don't want to present some written document, some PDF that your guests have to sign before appearing, because I don't know about you, but it's going to be like, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and those, sometimes it's easy peasy. It's very easy to schedule. You provide information. I've got like a speaker info sheet where I've got the answers to most everything that most people ask, so I can just cut and paste it into their form. Great, but it's kind of annoying when people start asking you to do all these things, and if they ask me to sign it and scan it back, and I might be like, this is too much of a pain. So you don't want to do that. But I have seen this, and it's about I would say it's less than 25% of the podcasts I've gone on have done this, but the savvy podcasts I go on, what they do is they have a checkbox when you schedule your podcast that essentially has this language that says, hey, you're agreeing to appear, you're giving the right to use it all, you're transferring all rights to them, et cetera. So you have that in this quick thing. And again, let's be honest, we're all used to just check a box. Yeah, I agree. And we don't need to think about it. Well, once you do that, you then have a record that your guests have agreed, have given you consent to do this, and so they can't complain later. So that's what you need to do. You need to basically get an electronic consent form with a checkbox, quick and easy. I'm not a techie, but it's not a problem to do that from a technical perspective. And if you do that, you will have maximum potential flexibility once you have the recording, the interview in the can, and you can use it for the maximum benefit. So that's what you want to do to make sure that you have the legal right to leverage your podcast interviews to the maximum extent allowed by the law. And again, if you have a really famous person on your show, that's great because it gives you the right to, kind of use that person's name, image, and likeness, over and over again in your marketing, not just as part of your podcast. So that's what you need to do. That's all for today's lesson. I hope you found it useful. Again, if you are finding these lessons useful, I'd encourage you to do two things. If you're a podcaster and want some more information about podcasts, go to our blog at youronlinegenius.com/blog. And there is an epic post I put up on Monday of this week. So I put it up, that would have been the 22nd, I guess, of September, thereabouts, 24th, I think, 25th. You can get that. It's about a 4,500 word post. It's got a lot of information. You can download a checklist for free inside that as well. That's if you are really focused on podcasting. If you're more interested, I've got other resources which address kind of the biggest mistakes that online entrepreneurs make, just kind of generally. And you can get that by going to mistakes.youronlinegenius.com. Again, that's mistakes.youronlinegenius.com. So that's my call to action to you today. That's how you can take action and start protecting your business and making sure that you are taking the steps you need to take. That's all for today. See you tomorrow, where we'll address another legal issue that comes up in the context of podcasting. Thanks.